we're getting our first real pictures of the staggering toll of this hurricane. It will make many Americans right here in Florida grateful that this hurricane ran parallel to the coastline for much of the day today and did not have a direct hit like it did in Haiti. Because tonight our crew has now landed there in Haiti. They are surveying the damage, and it is catastrophic. Hundreds are now among the dead. ABC's David Wright is there.
We've just arrived in one of the hardest hit areas, and this is a bird's eye view of the damage. Those tin roof shacks, no match for 145-mile-an-hour winds. Right after Matthew blew through Haiti at the beginning of the week, at first, a sense of relief that Port-au-Prince had dodged a bullet. Slowly, a clearer picture of the utter devastation is coming into focus. Jeremy in southwest Haiti is a city in ruins. Today, we're out with U.S. Marines who are delivering relief supplies.
We're flying out hygiene kits. We're flying out beans, rice, water.
The storm knocked out many of the roads and bridges, so for now, the only way in is with the help of the U.S. military. The death toll officially at about 300, but by one account, it's more than 800 and rising. Amid the rubble, people are finding what shelter they can, salvaging what's left, making dinner. Life goes on. Given the infrastructure problems, it's hard enough to figure out where the help is needed most, and then getting it here is even harder. David?
Merci bien fort mercredi. Pour participation, oui, bien entendu. Destruction is everywhere in Jeremy, in southern Haiti. We visited the area on Friday, where 3 days after the hurricane, the city was still trying to cope with disaster. Thousands of houses have been destroyed, and there is not enough food and drinking water. At the local hospital, doctors say they're desperate for help.
We don't have anything. No bandages, no penicillin. We had to send people home because we couldn't treat them here.
Adelan apparently broke her leg, but nobody can tell her for sure, as there are no X-ray machines that can confirm her injuries.
I'm in pain. My leg hurts, but I'm not sure what's wrong.
But there is more. Disease is a serious threat for people living here.
One of the biggest fears is the spread of cholera. Thousands of people have already died because of this disease. In this room that you can see here, there's around 12 people with cholera. 5 of them are children. This Friday morning, one of them died.
In the city, Junot Clairvaux is worried about the future. His house was destroyed. But what worries him the most is not having enough to eat in the next months.
We already did not have enough food. Now we have lost our crops. We have lost the trees that give us mangoes and coconuts. I don't know how we're going to deal with this.
Very slowly, some type of aid has started to arrive in the area, but it's not enough for local residents who are hoping for more. The government, local NGOs, and the United Nations are coordinating aid distribution. Murat Wahba says that everyone in Haiti needs to learn from past mistakes.
We are doing is that we've already had beginnings of response. There's a very large relief effort. But what we are doing mainly is to focus on the need for coordination, and we would like the Haitian government to be the coordinating authority. We don't want to repeat the experience of confusion of 2010.
Desperation and need have taken over southern Haiti. Men, women and children are waiting for aid that many claim is taking too long to arrive. Teresa Wo, Al Jazeera, Jeremy, southern Haiti.
En pile misère, en pile gangouille, n'a abdomen bout de mer, caille m'écrasé. Cyclone n'a pas passé, nous pas guetter pour nous courir. Dit tout. Mais nous perdons moun, perdons maman, go petite me calé tout, nous pas jeune.
Ante la imposibilidad de llegar por vía terrestre a Baracoa por los fuertes daños que ocasionó el huracán Matthew en las carreteras que dan acceso a ese territorio, nuestro equipo de prensa se trasladó en helicóptero hasta esa ciudad, pero antes sobrevoló San Antonio del Sur y Maicí, otras zonas afectadas. Las primeras imágenes muestran la destrucción que dejó el huracán en esos territorios. Llegamos casi a las 6 de la tarde.
En el Hotel Castillo están dando desayuno, que suba.
I'm Omar Villafranca on Exuma Island in the Bahamas. Hurricane Matthew tore through this part of the Caribbean last night. The wind and storm surge was so powerful, boats were smashed onto the shore. Hurricane winds over 140 miles per hour ripped the roof off this house in the Bahamas. We felt the wrath of Matthew as the storm hit overnight in Exuma. Beaches are empty, homes are boarded up, and here on Exuma Island, most of the people are without electricity. In Haiti, the death toll is over 100 and rising, 2 days after the hurricane hit the island nation as a Category 4. In Jérémie, 145-mile-per-hour winds decimated homes, while floodwaters swept away roads and bridges. The widespread damage prompted the Haitian government to suspend Sunday's presidential election. Back in the Bahamas, crews immediately started clearing debris from the roads at daylight. Magnolia Morley rode out the storm in the motel she manages.
We figured that we're blessed that the eye passed to the south of us, and we did not get more intense conditions than we did.
Cleaning up the debris will take several days. Thousands of people in the Bahamas are still without power, but many know the storm could have been much worse. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Exuma Island, the Bahamas.
Hurricane Matthew making landfall in the Bahamas before the sun could show the damage. A strong Category 3 shaking the island. Bright lights and sparks from explosions visible numerous times as the delicate electric grid failed. The morning light shows the aftermath. One hotel facade ripped off, exposing the rooms inside. Trees snapped like twigs, now blocking many roads. Hammocks and mattresses stuck in trees. Boats wrecked on dry land. And the demand for fuel is high. Crowds swarm, limited working gas pumps. Garth Buckner and other residents use axes, machetes, and chainsaws to help clear one road.
What we're doing is coming out here on the road and cleaning it up. Everybody can get through.
We are on the south end of New Providence Island, where Hurricane Matthew hit the hardest, an estimated 145-mile-per-hour winds. The damage, widespread and apparent, including this church, which was ripped in half.
It's a disaster as far as the building is concerned. Everything is out. It's finished.
The church where Pastor Barbara Remming gave sermons on Sundays wiped out.
Over there, you're going to see the chairs.
A mix of tidal surge and wind from Matthew leaves behind only an outline of the building which stood there before.
That this is the hand of the Lord, and He is going to move. For we know that all things work together for good. I am not discouraged at all.
Nassau officials tell the AP, despite the destruction, no one died, as the long cleanup process begins. Joshua Plogel, The Associated Press, Nassau.
The employee entrance to the hotel, the loading dock area.
How many kids are in there? 20? You guys own the restaurant? Do you guys run the restaurant? Yeah? Do you guys have phones you can call if you need? Talk to me loud. How you guys doing over there? You guys doing okay? Are you worried? Are you worried? Yeah? Have you called for help?
Another of the South's historic cities was hit hard by Matthew overnight. Jerika Duncan in Savannah, Georgia, where flooding is the major concern.
Matthew ripped through Savannah last night. The storm intensified in the early morning hours, dropping several inches of rain. Before the storm really started to make its impact, 75% of people who live in Chatham County, where Savannah is located, evacuated.
I've got a family, 2 little kids here, a wife. We don't want to be in the house when there's trees that big around it and come right through the roof.
The big concern now is flooding. Matthew's storm surge was projected to reach up to 11 feet in some coastal communities. Meanwhile, some of Savannah's streets were submerged before the worst of Matthew even arrived. To the south of us, on the tourist enclave of St. Simon's Island, the beach isn't even visible. And in coastal Brunswick, the streets were flooded long before the most severe storm surge.
That was Jerika Duncan in Savannah, Georgia.
It was probably a little worse than we expected, but yeah, it was pretty strong winds all night long, shaking the house. The water got about up to the house. It didn't come in or anything where we were at, but I know it flooded worse in some other places, so we did get pretty lucky.
I have never quite experienced anything like this. I wasn't really scared, but you couldn't see what was going on because it was so dark. And you couldn't open the window. You couldn't even see out the windows because of all the rain blowing. And this started up this bad at about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then went on from there.
Florida Governor Rick Scott has been busy warning millions of people for days now to evacuate their homes, and with good reason. But what he won't say, and he won't let any state employees say, if the reports are to be believed, is that the sheer power of this storm is directly related to climate change and the effects of a warming planet. And to put it simply, now every storm is a climate change storm. Matthew shocked storm watchers this week when it gained energy and grew from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane so quickly that it shattered all records. On Tuesday, Matthew weakened into a Category 4 storm and slammed Haiti. And even though the storm had weakened, Climate Signals nonetheless reported that it's the most powerful storm to hit Haiti in a generation. As it makes landfall in Florida, Matthew has also broken the record for the longest-lived hurricane of its strength in the Eastern Caribbean. And it's the only hurricane on record to have ever made landfall north of Miami along the east coast of Florida in the month of October. But thanks to climate change, storms like Matthew are becoming more and more severe. As Seth Borenstein wrote at phys.org recently, Hurricane Matthew is wet, wild, and weird, which is also a great way to describe the planet's climate now that we're clearly seeing the effects of global warming and climate change. The Atlantic's hurricane season officially runs from June 1st to November 30th, but the statistical peak is September 10th, when ocean temperatures are high, wind shear is low. That has changed now, and climate scientist James Hansen recently published a paper showing that Earth's global temperature right now is comparable only to a time 115,000 years ago, when that warming pushed the sea level up 20 to 30 feet higher than it is today. And as human activity has warmed the planet, scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory point out that the oceans have dramatically warmed over the last century because the ocean absorbs more than 90% of the Earth's excess heat increase that is associated with global warming. The observed ocean and atmospheric warming is a result of continued greenhouse gas emissions. A warmer ocean and a warmer atmosphere means there's more energy in the ocean and more energy in the atmosphere. And more energy in the ocean and the atmosphere means more fuel for smaller tropical depressions to quickly grow into giant and powerful superstorms like Matthew did. Climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann told the Huffington Post that the nearly unprecedented rapid intensification we saw with this storm is favored by warmer oceans and greater ocean heat content. Part of this has to do with the fact that oceans aren't just getting warmer at the surface, they're getting warmer deep below the surface, too. Scientists with the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and NOAA found earlier this year that half of the heat that's been added to the ocean has been added in just the last 2 decades. And 35% of that extra warmth was found at depths below 700 meters, a sharp increase from just 2 decades ago when only 20% of the extra heat was stored below 700 meters in the ocean. Normally, when a hurricane hits the Caribbean, it stirs up cooler waters from deep below the surface, and those cooler waters help weaken the storm and dissipate some of its energy before it makes landfall. But with those deeper waters now holding 15% more heat than they held 2 decades ago, there's less cool water that can be stirred to the surface to break up the storm's energy. Instead, now there's much warmer water being brought to the surface that actually feeds the hurricane. Climate deniers roll their eyes when we say that this hurricane, and frankly every storm now, is connected to climate change. Rush Limbaugh even accused the National Hurricane Center of being partisan and overhyping Hurricane Matthew's severity.
So in hurricane tracking and hurricane forecasting, I've been able to spot where I think they might be playing games because it's in the interests of the left to have destructive hurricanes, because then they can blame it on climate change, which they can desperately continue trying to selling.
Rush is, of course, wrong, and there's no need to desperately prove climate change or how it contributes to more frequent, more powerful, and more deadly storm events. It's a simple scientific fact. No one is saying that there wouldn't be any hurricanes or powerful thunderstorms if we stopped burning carbon and tackled runaway climate change. What climate scientists and others are saying is that hurricanes and storms would not be as frequent, as severe as they are if humans weren't warming the planet. It simply makes sense that more heat in the atmosphere and the oceans means more energy for storms like Matthew to feed. There's also more water vapor in the atmosphere, itself a powerful greenhouse gas, which provides even more energy and more fuel for storms to form and rapidly build intensity, even over land, like we saw in the 1,000-year event in Ellicott City, Maryland earlier this year that killed 2 people and cost that city hundreds of millions of dollars. Tropical storm Matthew would have likely formed anyway in the absence of global warming and climate change, but the fact that Matthew so quickly became such a powerful hurricane so late in the season is directly linked to the fact that human activity, specifically burning fossil fuels, is causing our planet to warm. As a result, 2016 is the first year in recorded history that CO2 levels in the atmosphere have topped 400 parts per million for the entire year. And that means that there is a certain amount of warming and climate change that's guaranteed into the future. But that's even more reason to take bold action now. It's time for Rick Scott and the mainstream corporate media to start being responsible and start telling the truth about how man-made global warming fuels and strengthens hurricanes like Matthew and the extreme storm events we've seen across the world this year. We can't stop every extreme storm event from happening, But we can demand that our politicians make our planet's climate crisis their top priority. We can put a price on carbon. We can start funding efforts to make our cities greener and more resilient. And we can hold the fossil fuel industry accountable for lying to consumers and investors about the threat that their business model poses to humanity. This is a serious problem. And all the demagoguing on the right and all the folks who are tied into the fossil fuel industry with all their attempts to tobaccoize it are not working.
We begin with new information about the Beulah Hill fire, still going strong southwest of Pueblo. It has grown to 3,000 acres in size, burning at least 7 homes so far.
Tonight, 1,250 people are under evacuation as the wildfire continues to rage near Beulah Valley.
We're also getting a better idea of the areas at risk.
Typhoon Eri continues to linger in the South China Sea, bringing heavy rain to China's southeastern coastal areas. Weather authorities say the storm's expected to move northwards on Monday to China's Hainan Island and Guangdong province. Experts have yet to figure out whether the storm will make landfall in China, as they're not sure if the cold weather system heading down from the north will disrupt the typhoon. Parts of Taiwan have already been hit by downpours over the past 3 days. Heavy rain and gales have also been seen in China's Guangdong, Fujian and Zhejiang provinces during the weekend.
In South Korea, a powerful typhoon has left 6 people dead and 4 others missing. Typhoon Chapa, which hit the southern coast, caused power cuts in more than 230,000 homes and caused the cancellation of a film festival in the city of Busan. The typhoon also triggered severe storm warnings in Japan.
These caves, perched above the village of Savnov, once served as a place to hide from raiding bandits. That was 2 centuries ago. Now villagers in Tajikistan's Pamir Mountains are facing a new kind of threat.
The climate is slowly changing. It's getting hotter, and the glaciers on Labnazar and Fetchenko are melting faster.
The Labnazar Glacier looms over Savnov village. Waters from mountain glaciers allowed people to settle here and farm the land. But weather patterns have changed, making it harder to plan for the sowing season.
Birds are coming later. During harvesting, we had problem with birds which are eating. Now we have no problem because it's changing climate. We earlier plant and we earlier also get at the harvest.
They say warmer temperatures have also increased outbreaks of fungal diseases in their crops, but it's the melting glaciers that are of most concern. This is one of the newest lakes in Tajikistan. It was formed last July when a mud flow caused by glacial melt swept across a valley and blocked the Gund River, creating a natural dam that submerged homes and a portion of the M41, better known as the Pamir Highway. Waves of water carrying glacial sludge came crashing down the valley. 80 houses were destroyed, but no lives were lost. Emergency response teams have been training people how to react to disasters like these, but their work may have only just begun.
93% of the Tajikistan territory is covered by high mountains, which have lots of glaciers, and only Pamirs have over 260 glaciers lakes so far, and 20 out of those pose a real threat to the communities downstream.
Glaciers across Central Asia are melting at an alarming rate. Tajikistan itself may lose up to 30% more of its glaciers by 2050.
I don't know if it is possible to compare it to small island countries which will be affected by sea level rise. I mean, Tajikistan will obviously not completely disappear, but since this region is highly dependent on the water coming from Tajikistan, it will be severely affected.
World leaders agreed at last year's Paris climate talks to cap emissions and keep global temperature rises below 2 degrees Celsius. But people living on the front line of climate change are not celebrating yet, preparing instead for the next surprise in their changing environment. Pearlie Jacob, Al Jazeera, Gorno-Badakhshan, Tajikistan.
Overflowing rivers are causing flooding in several areas near the capital city, Adelaide. Authorities have lined the banks of the Gawler and Wakefield rivers with 60,000 sandbags. 80,000 recorded lightning strikes have damaged power lines across the state. Outages have affected over 1 million residents. The weather is expected to worsen and citizens have been told to prepare. Experts say up to 100 millimeters of rain is expected to fall on the Adelaide Hills region from Sunday to Tuesday.
If you watched the corporate news at all this weekend, you probably heard a lot about Donald Trump's bad week and how it was a turning point in the presidential campaign. But you probably didn't hear anything about another big turning point, one that demonstrates how little time we really have left to stop climate change. Last week, the Scripps Institute of Oceanography announced that the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere has stayed above 400 parts per million throughout the entire year up to this point. We've crossed the 400 parts per million threshold before, sometimes for weeks at a time, sometimes for months. But the concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere usually dips at the beginning of autumn, something that just hasn't happened this year. As a result, scientists now think that the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere will stay above 400 parts per million permanently. That's right, permanently, as in forever, at least in human terms. This is, to paraphrase Vice President Joe Biden, a big effing deal. The last time there was this much carbon in the atmosphere, human beings didn't even exist, at least not in our current form. And just for some perspective, 400 parts per million is already about 50 parts per million more than what most scientists consider safe levels of CO2 concentrations. So yeah, things don't look good at all for planet Earth. Couple this with vanishing Arctic sea ice, rising sea levels, and the fact that 2016 has already been the hottest year on record, and things look even worse. As if it weren't already obvious, it should be now, we are rapidly running out of time to stop climate change. We're already in the danger zone, and every single day we keep pumping fossil fuels into our atmosphere just pushes us closer toward total climate devastation. The situation may even be worse than most people realize. For example, James Hansen, one of the world's leading climate scientists, now argues that the 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level threshold that most international institutions say is the baseline for how much warming we can take is nonsense and a prescription for disaster. He explained why last year.
2 degrees is actually a prescription for disaster. That's actually well understood by the scientific community. We know that the prior interglacial period, about 120,000 years ago, it's called the Eemian in Europe, but it was less than 2 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial conditions, and sea level was at least 6 to 8 meters higher. So it's crazy to think that 2 degrees Celsius is a safe limit.
Hansen now argues that we need to lower the limit of acceptable warming by a whole degree to 1 degree Celsius, a number we're already 8/10 of the way to reaching globally, and that we passed years ago in the Arctic. So that's the situation we're in. It's very obviously a dire one, which raises the question, what do we do about it? With global climate change rapidly reaching the point of massive worldwide destruction of our environment that sustains our lives, how do we stop it in its tracks and maybe, just maybe, reverse some of the damage that we've already done? Well, first, we keep carbon in the ground by ending all subsidies and imposing a worldwide carbon tax on the production, emission, and uses of all greenhouse gases. Then we do what we should have done decades ago. We leave fossil fuels behind once and for all. This is more possible now than at any time in our history. As the Department of Energy recently concluded, the cost of 5 leading clean energy technologies has fallen between 40 and 94%. Yes, 94% drop in price just since 2008. As dark and gloomy as the situation is, we have an extraordinary opportunity here to create a much better future that is right now very well within our grasp. So let's get to work before it's too late.
The Paris Agreement alone will not solve the climate crisis. Even if we meet every target embodied in the agreement, we'll only get to part of where we need to go. But make no mistake, this agreement will help delay or avoid some of the worst consequences of climate change. It will help other nations ratchet down their dangerous carbon emissions over time and set bolder targets as technology advances, all under a strong system of transparency that allows each nation to evaluate the progress of all other nations. And by sending a signal that this is going to be our future, a clean energy future, it opens up the floodgates for businesses and scientists and engineers to unleash high-tech, low-carbon investment and innovation at a scale that we've never seen before. So this gives us the best possible shot to save the one planet we've got. I know diplomacy can be easy and progress on the world stage can sometimes be slow. But together with steady, persistent effort, with strong, principled American leadership, with optimism and faith and hope, we're proving that it is possible.
This year may be only half over, but 2016 is already on track to be the hottest year ever on record. In the midst of this, during the first presidential debate on Monday, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton sparred briefly over climate change.
Take clean energy. Some country is going to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Science is real.
I do not say that.
And I think it's important that we grip this and deal with it, both at home and abroad.
Clinton was referring to a tweet Trump sent in 2012 in which he wrote, quote, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive." Trump later said he meant it as a joke, yet he has continued to suggest climate change is some sort of hoax. His comments were highlighted this week in a new TV ad produced by the Sierra Club.
All of this with the global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay?
They said that you called climate change a hoax. Is that true?
Well, I might have. I believe that climate change is not man-made. We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement. Our president is worried about global warming. What a ridiculous situation.
That's right. Donald Trump has said that if he is elected, he will weaken the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, abolish President Obama's Clean Power Plan, promote fossil fuel exploration, and recruit oil and gas executives to lead his cabinet. Well, our next guest writes in the New Republic about, quote, "a world at war. We are under attack from climate change, and our only hope is to mobilize like we did in World War II. Quote, "Day after day, week after week, saboteurs behind our lines are unleashing a series of brilliant and overwhelming attacks. In the past few months alone, our foes have used a firestorm to force the total evacuation of a city of 90,000 in Canada, drought to ravage crops to the point where Southern Africans are literally eating their seed corn, and floods to threaten the priceless repository of art in the Louvre."
Our guest goes on to write, "The enemy is even deploying biological weapons to spread psychological terror. The Zika virus, loaded like a bomb into a growing army of mosquitoes, has shrunk the heads of newborn babies across an entire continent. Panicked health ministers in 7 countries are now urging women not to get pregnant. And as in all conflicts, millions of refugees are fleeing the horrors of war, their numbers swelling daily as they're forced to abandon their homes to escape famine and desolation and disease. World War III is well and truly underway, and we are losing." Those are the words of Bill McKibben, who joins us today in our New York studio, co-founder of 350.org, author of a number of books, including Earth, Making a Life on a Tough New Planet. His other new piece in the New Republic is headlined, "Recalculating the Climate Math." Bill, welcome back to Democracy Now!
Well, it's good to be here.
So you just heard the clip from the first presidential debate. You are certainly escalating the discussion about where climate change needs to fit into this. Talk about what the candidates have said and what you think actually needs to happen.
Well, the context is July and August were the 2 hottest months we've ever measured on this planet. And in fact, the scientists who look at the proxy records from before we had thermometers tell us that July and August were probably the 2 hottest months in the history of human civilization. Against that backdrop, to see a buffoon like Trump playing games with climate change is sobering. But it's also sobering to realize that, none of our political leaders have said what we need to do on the scale we need to do it. If we're going to have a chance of dealing with climate change, it means mobilizing in ways that we haven't in a very long time. And one of the points of writing this first piece for the New Republic this year was to demonstrate that at least that was possible. If you go look at how America mobilized during World War II, the industrial might that we brought to bear, and then you do the calculations, it's at the outside edge of possible that we could, in the short time that we have, build enough solar panels and wind turbines. But it's going to take the same kind of focused effort.
But your use of the analogy of war for a country that is involved in war at the drop of a hat, war on terrorism, war on poverty, war on drugs, yes. and not to mention all the shooting wars as well, the actual wars. Your decision to use that analogy.
So the point in this case was that, I mean, the war on drugs is a completely phony idea, right? It's just a way of justifying all sorts of bad ideas. In this case, it's not that we need to go to war with climate change, it's that we're under siege. I mean, by all the measures by which one thinks about warfare, we're in one. We're losing territory all the time. I mean, there are literally islands disappearing. You know, we've lost huge swaths of the coral in the world this year alone. A wave of warm water swept across the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. In many places, 80–90% of coral died in a matter of weeks. These atolls that have been there forever. In the Arctic, you know, ice that's been there for millennia upon millennia is now gone. I mean, the world looks entirely different from a satellite now than it did 30 years ago. So the question is not whether or not we're in a conflict. The question is whether or not we're going to fight it or whether we're going to keep listening to the Exxons of the world and do nothing.
So in this piece you do, recalculating the climate math, the numbers on global warming are even scarier than we thought. What shocked you most? Go through those numbers.
This comes from a remarkable report from a group called Oil Change International in New York. And you'll remember that a few years ago we talked about the sort of new climate math that launched the fossil fuel divestment movement. At that time, what we understood was that the world's fossil fuel industry had far too much carbon in its reserves, 5 times as much as we could afford to burn. What this new study indicates, and it's important to kind of get this, is that the coal mines and oil and gas fields that we already have in production have enough carbon in them to take us past the 2-degree mark that the UN has set as the line for catastrophe. That is, there's nothing about the future anymore. We literally can't build anything else and stay within those limits. No Dakota pipeline, no new coal mines in Australia, none of the things that our political leaders, I mean, Justin Trudeau in Canada 2 days ago green-lighted a massive LNG project on the British Columbia coast. In the light of this new climate data, it's completely clear that these things we just can't do. We can drain most of what's in the fields that we've already got in production. But as that dwindles, we have to be replacing it day by day with renewable energy instead.
And how do you feel in terms of the amount of time devoted to the issue of climate change in all of the debates previously among the Democrats and Republicans and now in the first actual presidential debate?
In the course of the whole debate season, by far the high point was when the senator from my home state of Vermont stood up and someone asked him at one of the debates, what's the most important challenge facing the world? And he said, climate change. And 2 weeks later at the next debate, after all the editorialists had tut-tutted about how he should have said it was terrorism or something, they asked him again, and he said it again. Okay? That's a good sign that he's the most popular politician in America. But it hasn't yet fully filtered down into the Clinton campaign and certainly not the Trump campaign. The Democratic platform is very, very good on these issues. One hopes that if Ms. Clinton is elected, we'll be able to press her to try and live up to that platform.
You weren't feeling as encouraged when you served on the Democratic Platform Committee, and you described this in your piece. Explain what happened, what you were calling for, and what ultimately...
I was depressed halfway through because on the Platform Committee, which Bernie had asked me to serve on, we took a series of votes and we lost 7-6, on sort of party line votes on all sorts of things. But then Bernie refused to concede. He didn't back down. He didn't do what everyone told him he should do. He kept in the race through the final meeting about the platform in Orlando 2 weeks before the convention. And he did that in order to ensure that he'd have leverage in those discussions. That's what I mean, it's not like 8 years ago, when what Hillary Clinton wanted was for Barack Obama to pay off her campaign debt. What he wanted was progress on the issues. And as a result, by staring them down, the platform at the last minute turned markedly more progressive. Among other things, there's a call in there for an emergency climate summit within the first 100 days of a new administration designed to, and it says this in the platform, mobilize us for something like a World War II approach to climate change. We'll see if we can hold them to it. Clearly, it will take hundreds of thousands of people in the street, just like there were in New York 2 years ago this month.